Hello everybody, my name is Will. This is the nerdy.org channel, and today I'm showing you how to make a basic square in Canvas and make it move around. And this is one of the first things you'll want to learn if you're making a game. So first we're going to create two files. One is just going to be called index.html and the other one is going to be called game.js. And let's start by editing index.html. So we're going to do really basic here, nothing crazy. Just do a title and we'll just call it square demo. And then let's just move straight down and let's create a canvas. And we'll call it canvas ID equals game. And we'll just say generated by JS file. And we'll leave it at that. We can also say you do not have a canvas enabled browser here. And that will show up if they don't have Canvas enabled browser. So now what we'll do is just go right above the end HTML tag and just do script type equals text slash JavaScript and src equals game.js and close that tag there and press save changes. So now when I go into index.html, nothing shows up yet. That's fine. I could also just give a little style here. We'll just say border is 1px solid gray, just so we can see the region here, and it's quite small. So when you're doing canvas, you can't add the width here, otherwise things will get messed up. You have to do it like this, and so we'll just give it a width of 720 and a height of 480. But there's also a way to change that in JavaScript if we want. So the next thing we'll do is we'll just start our game.js file, and so we're going to do window.onload equals function. We could do that, but what I'm actually going to do is create a function called gamefunc, and we'll just leave it like that. And we'll say function gamefunc goes like this, and we can do stuff in there. And I'll just do console log func, and I'll show you why I'm doing it this way. I can also do window.onResize equals gamefunc. So let me save this file, and you'll see that we have func here. But if I resize the document here, like get rid of console log, it did console log func again. I can also go like this here. I've just made the window smaller, it's done it again. I've resized the window again, it's done it again. And this allows our actual game to just kind of keep working if the game reloads. And so what we're going to do is actually set up some variables inside of this. In fact, you know what? I'm going to keep it really simple. Let's not even handle resize. Let's just assume they're not going to resize their browser in the middle of the game. I don't want to get into too many fancy things for this. So the first thing that we need to do is set up some variables here. And so what I'm going to do is just do that up top. I'm going to say var game equals document get element by ID. Whoops. And our ID for this is game, lowercase. And you can see that right here. The ID is game. And what I can actually do is get rid of these here, because we'll just do it dynamically in here. And we'll say the context, but I'm going to use ctx equals game.getContext, and it's going to be 2D. And that allows us to actually manipulate this a bit. So now what we're going to do is basically say game.width equals 720 and game.height equals 480. And you'll see here that it actually does that properly. Now when it first loads, it's loading it as a basic square, and then we're resizing it. So if we actually put those back here, we would see that there's no flash. And additionally, what we could do is say 1440 and 960. We'll see the flash again, but it will resize it to a larger canvas size. But I don't want to do that. I just wanted to show you how you could do it. So we'll remove those and we'll keep it in there. Get rid of the flash. Save those changes, and we're back to 720 by 480. Okay, so now that we have our variables here, what we want to do is actually do some things with it. So we can do CTX for our game context, and we can do fill style, and we can just put a color in there. I'm going to do red to make it really obvious. Now what we can do is ctx.fill rect, and what we're going to do is we're going to do an x and a y coordinate first. So it's going to start at 0. So 0 is up here, and 0 for the y-axis is still up there. It's basically x-axis, y-axis. So if I do 0 for x, it's right here. If I do 10 for x, it's like right here. If I do 0 for y, it's right here. If I do 10 for the y-axis, it's like right here. So that's the amount of pixels from the start of the axis. Now I can do the width and the height. Now if I keep it like this, we're just going to see a small red dot in the top left here. You can barely see it. Let me make that a little bigger. Let's just make these 15 pixels by 15. And you can see we have a small red square. So we've already done it. But what we want to do is actually fill our game up with red. And so what we can do here is we can do game.width and game.height. And that's basically going to fill our entire canvas with red. Additionally, what I could do is I could say I want it to be a little bit less than the full width and height. And as you can see, I now have a white border. And additionally, what I could do here is I could say, well, I also want the white border to be on the left. So I put 25 into the x-axis. And if I want it to be a little bit down, I can put 25 into the y-axis. So now I've done that, but I haven't accounted for that in the height and the width here. And so these now become minus 50 so that it doesn't get pushed over the edge there. And now you can see I have a white border around those edges. Now I'm not going to do that, but I wanted to show you how everything actually worked with the dimensions of our fill rectangle or fill rect for our canvas background. So I am going to change it from red to a nice grayish color. That's going to be F2, F2, F2. And now we have those there. Now, the next thing we want to do is actually create a small square that is going to be moving. And so for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up some more variables, and it's going to be called square x and square y. And I'm not going to give them any starting dimensions. Or actually, I will. I'll say it's going to start at the top left. And the reason for this is because we are going to alter the square x and the square y so that those can move around the screen as things happen. So game func here, we're basically going to do another context.fill style, and for this one we'll just do purple, and ctx fill rect to actually get our square in there. And so we do the same thing as we did before, but instead of 0, 0, we're going to do square x square y. And then what we'll also do here is we'll set up sorry, those are supposed to be commas, is a square color, and that's where we'll put our purple variable, and we'll do square width, and we'll make it 10 pixels wide, and square height, we'll do 10 pixels high. So now let's just take the square color here and do that. And then right here for our fill rect, we're going to say that the width is square width and the height is square height. And this lets us have these variables be able to be manipulated. So now when I reload, I can see a 10 pixel by 10 pixel purple square in the top left. So you may be wondering, how can I actually make this move? Well, that's easy. What we're going to do is we're going to set up a small variable, and it's going to basically be var moving equals set interval, and we set this parentheses up here, and we do function, go down here, and then we do a comma after our function, and we do how fast we want to actually update it. So if I did 1000 by 30, that means it's going to update 30 times a second, or 60 times a second. Now I don't want that. If I do just the number 1000, I could do it update every 1 second, and I think that's a good place to start. So right in here, what we can do is let's just make it move to the right. We can just say square x plus equals 1. And that means every second, square x is going to increment by 1. And this isn't going to work immediately. You're not going to see any changes. The reason for that is because we're not actually updating our game function at all. So what we can do is we can actually say something along the lines of var refresh equals set interval, And instead of doing a function like we did before, we'll just use gamefunc as a reference, and we'll update this 30 times per second. This allows us to have 30 FPS in our game, but only updating the square every 1 second. And so as you can see, it did not work. That's okay. Let me just figure this out real quick. Oh, we haven't actually called our refresh. Or, hold on. Set interval. Gamefunc. Let me just try something. Let me make sure this is working. Let me just console log square x and see what's happening. So our square x is updating. And let's console log this here. Console log test and see if this is actually refreshing with the function reference. It is actually going. Square x. Oh, it's moving, except it's very slow. I apologize. There was never an error. I just didn't notice it fast enough. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to update it by 5 pixels. And so it'll be a little apparent. Every second it moves 5. But that doesn't look very good, does it? It kind of jumps across the page. If we wanted to make this a little bit better, we could actually update the FPS to 30 on this and plus it by 0.1. And so 30 times per second, it's going to update. And it's just going 1 pixel. And so it's still quite slow, but it's a lot smoother transition because it's incrementing at the same time as the actual game canvas is incrementing. Now, one thing I want to show you though is that this is actually going to go off of the page. So, well, let's wait real quick. This is going to go off of the canvas. And it's gone. So, in order to prevent that, I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. The width is actually going to be 200. So that way we can test it without having to wait a long time. In fact, I'll just make it a little better. 500. And so in the future when we do our tests, we'll be able to detect if it goes off the page a lot faster. And I'm also going to get rid of the console log. So there we can see it should have stopped. So this is how we actually handle that. First, let me get rid of these console logs here. We don't need those. It's kind of annoying to see it flash on the right side of the screen there. And what we're going to do is set up a collision detector. And so we're doing square x plus equals 1. But we need to know if it's at the actual side. And so what we do is we basically say if square x plus our square width is less than or is less than our game.width, then we want to increment it, and then we'll say else we want to decrease our x. And so what this means is that it's going to go across the right side. When it gets to the end, it's actually going to start going back left. And so let's check that out real quick. So now what's happening is that it's basically hitting the side, it's going back 1, but then our if statement is saying, oh, it's not at the end, let's go back right again. And so that's a small error. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a state. We're going to say square moving equals right. And so that basically means we can figure out if it's moving right or left. So right here we're going to say and square moving equals right, else we want to go to the left. But we need to do another if statement so it bounces back off the left. So now we'll say else if square x is greater than 0, that basically means that it's not at the left side. Then increment it or decrease it by 1 to move left. And we'll just make sure. No, that should be fine. And just for some contingency or redundancy here, we'll say and it's supposed to be moving left. Decrease it by 1. And let's see what happens there. Now we should have a nice little bounce effect where it hits the right side and then goes back to the left. Unfortunately, I forgot to set it to go left, so it's not going to do anything. But if we go in here, else. So if it falls under neither one of these cases, it's going right and it's gonna go there. Otherwise, if the square x is above 0 and it's moving left, and then we'll just say else if square x, I need a way to just update the right to the left efficiently. We can say else if square x is greater than 0 and square x equals game.width, we'll say plus square width here. Basically that's saying we'll do minus 1. Then that's when we change it to left. And if it's not that case, we say square moving equals right, so that it bounces back. This should work. Let's see. Will it bounce back? Hit the right. Update to left. Oh, I think we need to do that. This is good. You guys are seeing how you can bug test your own games. But I did not plan to do this at all. Hit the right, go left. Okay, now it should hit the left side and go back right. And we'll just see if we have a bug. Boom. Alright, cool. Now we're doing that. So now what we're going to do is actually set it up to also go down one. Alright? And so we'll basically say if square y plus square height is less than game.height and square moving y equals down, then we'll increase the square y to move down the page. Else if square y is above 0 and square moving equals up, this needs to be y, then we'll move it up the page. Else if square y plus square height equals game.height, that means it's hit the bottom, then square moving y needs to equal up now, so we move up. Else square moving y equals down. And we can just set that variable here, square moving y. And oh, it is going to start off as going down. So let's check out what happens there. Now we have a rectangle that is not only going to be able to bounce off the left and the right, it's going to be able to bounce off the top and the bottom. And if we experience any bugs, I'll make this square extremely large so that we can test it a lot easier. But here we should see that it hits the bottom. Now it's bouncing back up. And so what we've done is we've created an object that is able to bounce off the regions of our game using very basic collision detection. So what we can do now is actually restore this, we'll say a 15 by 15 square, and we're actually going to update this a lot faster. And so instead of 30 seconds, we're going to update this 60 times per second for 60 FPS, and we're going to be increasing and decreasing by 2. And so now our little square should be moving a lot faster. And so you can see it kind of flashes a bit. Ooh, we've run into an issue. And the reason for that is because, I don't know why. But essentially we're doing it a little too fast. Let's go back to 1. Oh, I know why. So if you increase a position by more than 1, you have to account for that based on the interval. So if you're coming to the right side and the next move it's going to do is by 2, it throws off the collision detection a little bit based on how fast you're actually refreshing the screen. But as you can see, it's actually moving quite quickly. And this is how you can create a basic Pong game or something like that. So we've successfully updated our game here, and let's just make the game refresh at 60 seconds. We get a little bit more smoother transition, no more jumping and flashing of the square. So that's all pretty cool. You could also update this. You could do 120 FPS. Everything would update a little faster, but it just depends on what browser or device you're using to check it. But obviously you can always update it. So that's it. That's how you do it. You could do other things. You could make it so the square, you have to catch it with your mouse or something like that, or maybe you're dodging it. You could add a lot of these into there using multiple positions. You can use an array to keep track of the positions, square X, square Y, square moving Y. And you can do a bunch of different shapes. And then you can also detect if they're bumping into each other. You can make them explode and become multiple if they hit each other. So if a square hits a square, they both turn into two separate squares. So now you have 4 squares, and you can track those. So you can do a lot of cool things using algorithms and functions. You can actually make like special effects and particle effects. So it's pretty cool. But that is it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did like it, please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel.